Okay, good morning, everybody. Today is February 6th, 2021, and welcome to another POTA SOTA forum. Today, I'm very excited. We're having a special guest that it was introduced to me by our own Bob K4RLC. So it's appropriate to allow Bob to introduce the guest, and go for it, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Demetrius. I'll just take a minute here to introduce Ariel, November Yankee 4 Golf. If you really want to know the lowdown, go to his QRZ page. I'm a member of the W4C, the Carolina SOTA group, and that's how I got to know Ariel. Now, distantly, we'll have a meeting up in the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia at the end of April. Looking forward to some summits there. Um, he's amazing. He is an incredible operator, has 305 DXCC entities in CW, but he also holds the award, and Ariel, correct me if I'm wrong, for becoming a mountain goat, the fastest. A mountain goat is getting 1,000 points for summiting in the fastest time in North America, 8.9 months, and the sixth fastest time in the world. Uh, he also published a really nice book, and I don't know if you, sorry, I've got the Kindle edition has his 100 summits that he did. It's very reasonable in price. And what's really nice about it, sometimes it's hard to find a trailhead in a summit. And Ariel has just very detailed instructions as well as deep GPS coordinates of how to get there. The other thing is he has a really nice YouTube channel. He does almost these professional quality YouTube videos of his summits. Pretty much Western North Carolina, Northwestern South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia, what's called the Southern Appalachians. And I'm sorry, that's the Pitons in St. Lucia I summited a couple of years ago. Uh, so the book is well worth it, the Kindle edition, as well as all the equipment and things like that. And again, the YouTube stuff. And what's amazing is that he will be sending with one hand and logging with his left hand. And I think if I read, you're a classical guitarist, and that probably helps with some of the finger stuff there. So I'm going to shut up and looking forward to learning a lot from Ariel. And I really appreciate you doing this presentation today. Over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Bob. Thanks for that nice introduction. And do I have the privileges to share my screen right now? I guess I do, don't I?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, all, and thank you for the privilege of being able to present Summits on the Air to you. I'm very much an enthusiast for Summits on the Air and sharing it. And thanks, Bob, for inviting me to your club.
You're welcome.
And so without further ado, I'll keep going. And so why do Summits on the Air? To answer the why question, we have to answer a bunch of what questions and other questions. What is SOTA? And why do we activate? And what makes a great activator? And SOTA is composed of a community of activators and chasers. So they sort of go hand in hand, and they have a symbiotic relationship. One needs the other. And so why chase is another question. What makes for great chasers? And there's a whole skill set that's involved in chasing as well. And what bands and modes are used for Summits on the Air? How does one prepare to be an activator or even a chaser? It's much easier to be a chaser than an activator in terms of infrastructure. But there are some skills that are unique to chasers as well. How did others do it? And I guess I'll go through examples of what was done in the Whiskey 4 area. What equipment does one need? And what do you gain from engaging in this endeavor? There must be some positive aspects to engaging in this activity. And what is the best way to share it? And lastly, what life skills does one get or one apply? In a lot of these things, you both develop life skills and you learn life skills in the process. And so Bob already went through a little bit of my background, and just to elaborate a little bit, I was licensed in 2010 and finally got my extra class later that year in July. I also acquired a Canadian call sign. When I visited Prince Edward Island in Canada, I had the privilege of meeting the top band legend Jeff Briggs, VY2ZM. And he happens to be an examiner for the Canadian Licensing Board. And so I said, why not? The Canadian license exam is not easy, and I did prepare for it, but I barely passed, but I did pass. So one of the nice things about Prince Edward Island is you get to have a 2x2 call from the get-go. So I got my initials to boot, VY2AJ. So that's a nice bonus. I come from a DXing background. My first 5 years or so, maybe even, I've only been in SOTA since 2018. I was licensed in 2010. So most of my time in my early days of amateur radio was pursuing DX. And I'm very enthusiastic as well of pursuing QRP DX. And I have an award from QRP ARCI for 179 DXCC entities. And very much from the beginning, I've been an enthusiast of CW because of the advantages of CW in terms of reach. You don't have to have a lot of power to make a lot of contacts. And you guys, because of the nature of your club, probably appreciate that a lot. That CW is really a very, very fun mode. In 2015, during my visit to Prince Edward Island, we went there with the purpose of engaging in the Euro HF Championship, and we happened to, we did win that. We scored really well. We had a bunch of good operators. There were 4 of us. It was a multi-single. And then later that month, in July of 2015, I went on to a solo DXpedition to St. Pierre and Miquelon, and mostly it was 99% CW with a few sideband QSOs. But that was a very fun experience. And in 2016, I entered the DX Marathon and joined the QRP division, and I missed 5th place by one QSO. So that was a sort of a heartbreaker, but live and learn. And in 2017, I did the same thing again, except I joined the 160 meter division because I wanted to get as many DXCC on 160 meters as I can in 1 year. I think I did 117 that year. You are having trouble finding vaccination locations or even making appointments. Somebody asking a question? Showing you where to. Okay, going on, I got introduced to SOTA in 2018 by a friend of mine, Scott Carter. The call sign is KW4JM, and in 2019, I did finally get my mountain goat, and it was a.
Ariel, excuse me 1 second. Walter Grosser, you need to mute your computer.
Can you mute me?
It's not going to occur because of the rules in the United States Senate. So you're saying the minimum wage won't be in?
Okay, we're good. I muted everybody.
Go on. And so to date, I have about 141, I think last count, 141 activations under my belt, and 114 of those are uniques. It's hard to keep both a high points per activation average and uniques, because now I have to go out of the W4 to get 10 pointers, and that's not so easy. So first question to ask is, what is Summits on the Air? And that's the URL for the website. It was started in the United Kingdom in 2002, and it's a very well organized activity in terms of the people, the management team that organizes it. It's an all volunteer management team, and there are no dues. So you can get your award without paying any dues. You can get your credits, unlike Logbook of the World, where you have to pay for DXCC credit. You don't need to pay anything to get your awards. If you wanted to get the trophy, though, you sort of have to pay for that. And the core of the management is in structuring a database of summits, activators, and chasers, and the bookkeeping, all that. Once you upload your log, there's a brilliant team of IT guys that actually manage the database. And they also have built in into the tools the SOTA mapping project, SMP, where you can look at other people's tracks to see how they manage to summit their summits. And the summit database also has descriptions of how other people have done their summit. So there's a lot to be learned from the tools that they have in the system. And right now it has the presence in 100 countries, and there are now currently 185 associations. It's very popular in Europe, and of course in the mountainous areas like Germany and Switzerland, Slovenia, Poland. And United Kingdom is not very mountainous, but they have a lot of little hills that are very popular amongst the UK group. And currently there are about 8,300 activators and about 8,800 chasers, of which a great many of them are also activators. And I think they have recorded, as of a couple of days ago, about 358,000 and change activations to date. And second question we ask is, why activate? And to us who like the challenge of doing something different and combining it with a hobby of amateur radio, it is a challenge, because it is an adventure. Just planning one and just going to the trailhead is an adventure sometimes. And that's the fun part of the activation. And some of it's hard, but it's still fun. And it's also a healthy lifestyle. You're out in the open air, and you're enjoying nature. And you also get the chance to be an ambassador for amateur radio and to demonstrate it in public spaces. And you get to experience the grandiose beauty of the mountains. And here we're blessed in the Carolinas of having the Appalachian range not too far away. So that's really a bonus for us here in the Southeast. And you get to enjoy being alone, and a lot of my hikes are by myself. But some of them are not. In fact, I think 46 of them was with my friend, Scott Carter, who I went along with him. He went along on some of my hikes. We were together about 46 times. You get to develop good operating skills for your favorite mode of communication in amateur radio. In my case, it's CW. I don't think I've ever activated in single sideband, although I probably have made QSOs in single sideband. I'm primarily a CW guy. And you get to develop skills for setting up in strange places. You get set up radios in very tiny summits, all covered in brush, or maybe no trees at all, and it's a bare rock, and you get the gamut. And you get to enjoy this hobby despite if you have homeowners association's limitations, you're not shackled by that. And at the end of 1,000 points, you get to become a mountain goat. And you get a big sense of accomplishment once that's done. I guess somebody's sending CW in the background.
That's the host.
Dimitri, you need to mute.
Okay, let me go on. And the next question is, what makes a great activator? Well, you have to sort of need to love hiking and being out there in the woods and hiking up to summits. And you have to sort of like operating portable and have the gear for that, and like setting up portable. And you sort of have to learn to yearn for exploration and new ways to tackle a new summit, or finding a path, or making your own trail. And there are some of us who are more skilled at that. I am less skilled at that. I tend to favor the easier ones. A great operator is a great activator is also a great operator, able to dispose of a pileup in short order, and need to be a pathfinder and shared experiences and lessons learned. I hope I have been a little bit of a pathfinder, at least in the lessons that I've learned in publishing my book. But there are some of us who are really good examples of that, who are good planners and prepares well. And some of those are in our W4C association. Our Pat Harris is probably the one of the best planners I've seen in organizing very difficult activations. Dean Blair is another one, and Scott Carter. They're very avid hikers, and they're very well versed in setting up amateur radio stations in summits. And next question is, why chase? You get to experience the thrill of the chase, and also take part in summits on the air. And chasers are essential. Without chasers, activators really won't have anybody to contact. And of course, the chasers need the activators as well. And the chasers is a good platform for developing operating skills, and they do the heavy lifting in the QSO, because the activators are only transmitting 5 watts. They can be very far, and you get to collect chase points, just like the activators collect summit points. The chasers collect chase points, and you do get an award, and you get to become what's called the Shack Sloth at the end of 1,000 points. And there are people who are very skilled and very enthusiastic about chasing and accumulate lots and lots of points. So what makes for great chasers? And I picked 2 guys, or actually a guy and a gal, a couple actually. Gary Oshard, W0MNA, and Martha Oshard, W0ERI, are out of Kansas. And you can see from this graphic on the screen, they're out of Kansas. They're in the middle of the country, and they get to be able to work the mountain ranges on both sides of the country. On the western part in Colorado and California, in Washington, all those mountains, they get to chase those, and they get to chase us in the Southeast as well. And I think in this example, he chased 4 of the members of the W4 SOTA group, Dean Blair, Pat, Joel, and Scott. the same day. And this is probably his most productive day. He had 286 chase points in a single day. And so I asked him for his input on what makes for a great chaser. And he provided that. Let me see if I can. And right now, Gary has 166,000 chase points, number one in the US, number 7 in the world. And his wife, Martha, has 147,000 points, and the first woman to break the 100,000 barrier. I don't think any other woman has broken the 100,000 barrier. So she's number 1 in the for the YLs, and he's also number 12 in the world. So she's a world-class chaser. And the nice thing about both of them is there's a 4 QSO requirement to be able to get credit for a summit activation. And once you get Gary, you get Martha, and you get half of your quota right there. And so what did Gary tell me? He says a good antenna is essential. And he happens to have a tri-bander at 50 feet. And he says, learn to use your filters effectively and pull out the weak signals out of the noise. Like I said, they do the heavy lifting. He says to back off on the audio gain. And he says, you'll be surprised how much you'll be able to hear by not overloading the audio path. And listen to how the activators are responding to chasers and develop a timing for when to send your signal. And send your call once and in the clear. Be patient and let the mob of callers thin out. Learn to listen. Each activator is different. You have to adapt to their rhythm. And have fun chasing, but don't be rude. And use proper phonetics and single sideband. And don't tune up on the frequency that the activator is transmitting at. It's really irritating for everyone. So these are all good pointers from Gary and Martha. So thanks, Gary, for giving us that. So what bands and modes are best for summits on the air? And since all bands are good, and in terms of modes, all modes are good, although the lion's share of the modes used in summits on the air are CW, which is almost a half, single sideband, which is probably close to a third, and 2 meter FM is very popular. You can see in this graphic here, there's KR7JAS making a 150-mile summit to summit from Arizona's high point using a handheld Yagi. So I'll be going through some examples of that. So that's really for close-in contacts, typically less than 100 miles. And for the low bands, for local chasers are always asking us activators, please work 60 meters, because the local chasers, they can't hear us on the high bands, 20 meters and sometimes 40. They can't hear us there because we just sort of skip over them. And 60 meters is an NVIS mode, near vertical incident skywave, and it's very productive to get those for local chasers. And you get the intermediate distances on 30 meters and 40 meters. You're now out between 200, 600 miles. And then for the long haul, you get 20 meters and up. You get, sometimes I've been chased by a chaser in New Zealand, ZL1BYZ. So in the higher bands, when the propagation allows it, is also workable. So let's go through some of them. This is a 2 meter band range, and I picked an activation done by one of the Southeast activators where he made 125 QSOs in one day, during the activation of Tray Mountain, which is this 10-pointer here. He made 22 summit contacts that day. And here, there's a group of chasers, FM chasers in the Atlanta region. And there's one out here, which is the furthest one, is the summit to summit here. And that was 152 miles away. Now we get to 60 meters. And this is your local, like I said before, local chasers. And range here is 100 to 600 miles as far as Pittsburgh. And some close-in contacts as well. Let's go to 40 meters, and now we've opened up our footprint now to about 850 miles, all the way out to New Hampshire. And let's go to 30 meters. Now we've expanded our footprint out to 1,600 miles, and we're all the way out to Phoenix now. You notice that there are no local chasers, that we're sort of skipping over them on 30 meters. And most of the QSOs are way out there. So all the local ones are being ignored if we don't do 60 meters. Now 20 meters, these are the long haul, coast to coast, Canada. And now we're across into Europe. This is Foxtrot 4, Whiskey Bravo, November. That's Chris out in France. And I believe this is A7GB in the southern Spain. And this is all 125 QSOs. And this happens to be Pat Harris from Tray Mountain in Georgia, NG005 on December 29th, 2020. So how does one prepare to be an activator? I think planning is really important. You have to develop some sort of plan, even for the easy ones. Unless you've been there many times and sort of know how to do it by heart, it's good to develop a pre-activation checklist, develop navigation skills on how to use handheld GPSs, and also the use of a compass. I still carry a compass, although I've never really used one other than just for the grins and giggles. I've really relied on technology to get me around and use tracks left by other activators. And you have to allocate for proper nutrition and make sure you have sufficient food and water with you. You need to be able to prepare for contingencies like weather, bad weather. And the days are not always nice. Sometimes you get wind and rain, and you have to sort of dress appropriately and even be ready for ice on the trails. You sort of have to also carry some sort of a first aid kit just in case. And if you have weak points in your setup, like maybe your batteries are not the greatest, maybe carry backup batteries. And if you're, sometimes I carry backup keys and sometimes even backup antennas, depending on where I'm going. I also carry a Garmin Inreach, which is a locator beacon. It's a satellite-based device, so you don't rely on cell service. And you also have to be mindful of animal encounters. And there's also the eventuality of having to go to the bathroom in the middle of the woods. So that's another consideration that you have to be prepared for. And the other aspect of preparation is physical fitness. And if you're not the most fit, then start on the easy ones and develop fitness. And as you develop fitness, do the harder activations. And test out your equipment beforehand to make sure that everything works and everything that you need is in your pack. So let's go through how others have done summits on the air. And here's an interesting one in Wayne McAlexander, W4KWM. He made Mountain Goat just using an HT on 2 meters. He had the most points using FM in 2019, and they did this by grooming a community of chasers in the Atlanta region, in North Georgia, by a process called chumming. They described it as talking to guys on repeaters on their way to the summits, and then have them chase them on simplex once they get up. And after a while, this community became a real community and can be relied on for chases, such that he was able to continue despite having upgraded to general. He didn't stop. He just kept going solely on 2 meter FM. And so now he still runs FM, but now he runs also HF, now that he has the privileges, and typically runs an Iesu FT891 at 45 watts. Here's his brother, Doug, N4HNH. He's also another mountain goat. And he and his brother Chase groomed that chaser community. And he's a good operator. And now he does QRO, now also does QRP as well. And he's an excellent chaser. He also has his YouTube channel, N4HNH YouTube channel, where he teaches all aspects of amateur radio. Here's Joel Shannon, KC4WZB, who got to be a friend of mine. He's closing in on double goat. One of the memorable experiences I have with Joel is when we did 6 activations in 24 hours. I think we got it's not quite a record, but it's 70 points in a 24-hour period. Believe it or not, somebody's done over 100 points in a single day activating somewhere in Europe. He now uses his favorite go-to radio now is the Icon 705. Here's an interesting couple. This is K1 Liz and NR3E. He used to be KI4TN. And this is Ron Burns and Liz Burns. Both of them are double goat and a half, actually. And Liz is amazing in that she is blind. She's a blind person. She cannot see where she's walking, and she's made double mountain goats. So that's an amazing feat that both of them have done. Of course, they go together. They're always together. And so Liz's eyes is Ron. And so, but she still manages to get up to summits, even bushwhacks with Ron. So she's amazing. This is my friend Scott, who accompanied me on a lot of my activations. He's now a triple goat. He loves CW, and he likes a bushwhack. He likes to make his own trails. He's a trailblazer in that sense. He uses a KX2 primarily, but he's done in the past an HB1B. And his current favorite antenna is the NY4G end-fed half wave. He took it on 13 Summit backpacking trip in North Georgia, and he's really enjoyed that. And another one, probably second in W4C in terms of points, is Dean Blair, K2JB. He uses KX3 and an LNR mountain topper. Excellent CW guy, and always uses FM. And he's actually number 5 in the all-time FM list in the US. And he's a first-class chaser. He's got 27,000 chase points. And his favorite antenna is one of the LNR ones, the mountain topper and Fed Z for 20, 30, 40. And lastly of the profiles is Pat Harris. He's our premier goat, quadruple goat, 4,000 points. He's the guy that likes to be comfortable up on the summit. He brings his hammock and just makes a day of it. Like I showed in my example, he made 125 QSOs. He'll be on a summit forever, just making contacts. He's our association manager, and he's sort of the pathfinder for all of us in W4 land. And so next question, what equipment is needed? And this is just a sampling of what I use. And what I've shown in this image is my LNR MTR4B, which I've only used once right now. Mostly I use a KX2. I've taken the K1 on a couple of activations and made a contact to ZL1 BYZ on that K1. I've used an MTR3B quite a few times, and I'm looking to acquire a QCX Mini for 60 meters for backpacking. My favorite antenna is a trapped and fed half wave, and I typically carry a mast because there are summits that don't have trees or trees that are not high enough. And I typically use Gaia GPS running on my phone. And I typically have also, I always wear a Garmin Instinct as a backup. And I've used in the past quite a bit the Garmin eTrex 30, but that has now been supplanted by Gaia running on my phone. I started out paper logging maybe for the first 20 or so, and then Pat Harris introduced us to phone logging, and I used my phone. I use OutDlog on iPhone. And Pat Harris also taught us how to use CalTopo as a good planning tool, and SOTA Mapping Project as a planning tool. For backpacking, I use an REI Flash 55. It's a 55-liter backpack. And for day hiking, I use something smaller, sometimes even smaller than 40 liters. But in the wintertime, I typically carry the 40-liter pack from REI, the Trail 40. Good boots are essential, and preparing to tackle ice is also important, especially in wintertime. I typically carry trekking poles and typically carry the Garmin Inreach as well. Chasing, I just have my shack radio, which happens to be a KX3. And I used to have a reasonably decent antenna farm. I used to have a hex beam and a couple of dipoles. But now I'm just, my antenna farm has been, I'm in an HOA, so it's an ever shrinking antenna farm. So what do I gain from summits on the air? And one of the things you gain is great friendships. Here's a picture of Pat Harris leading the double assault to Hyatt Ridge and Breakneck Ridge. A lot of these pictures are. And this bottom left picture is from I believe this is from the Roan Mountain. I think it's a spring outing in Roan Mountain in Tennessee. And so that's one of the pluses of engaging in this activity is developing great friendships and also great memories. I couldn't help but include a picture of the Matterhorn in Switzerland here in this slide. Snake Mountain is a very memorable one I did with Scott Carter. Stony Man in Virginia, sorry. These are both in Virginia. Black Balsam is in North Carolina. And Mount LeConte is sort of a unique summit in that it's one of those that have a lodge at the summit. It's pretty decent money to stay at the lodge, but it's really worthwhile. And after dinner, you get a chance to go to High Top, which you can observe sunset. So that was a very memorable experience for me. And so another way to share SOTA, and what's the best way, is to take someone along or tag along with someone. In my case, I also share it using YouTube videos of some of my activations. And I'm not the best at producing videos yet, but I'm trying to improve so that I can communicate what it's like in a better way. And so I have different seasons represented here, backpacking, even bike riding up the summits. I've done Klingman's Dome by riding the 11 and a half kilometers, I believe, from the base, Newfound Gap to the summit. I rode Mount Mitchell. It is a 7.6 kilometer ride. That's very steep, a steep ride, 7% grade in some places. And then I took my son to Grandfather Mountain for my number 100 unique, and there's a bushwhack in there too in the mix. So that's the way I've shared SOTA. And what skills, life skills, and like anything else, you need to set goals. And even in learning CW, you have to set goals. And it's important to be consistent. You have to keep doing the activity. That's the way you get to be good at it. And in this last one, great things can be accomplished one step at a time. And that's a literal one step at a time. This graphic is me climbing a high rock in Tennessee. And of course, I have a plug here for my antenna. It's an antenna I developed sort of my ideal antenna. If I had an antenna that I can bring with me, this is the one, because it sort of reflects how I operate. And quick deployment, quick takedown, has the bands I need. And I also, as Bob mentioned earlier, I produced a book as well. I think that concludes the presentation. I'll turn it over back to you guys for Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Ariel. So if anybody has any questions, please either unmute or type it on the chat there, and I'll be more than happy to ask the question.
Yes, I want to thank Ariel for such an outstanding presentation. I have been so impressed with what he's done, and I feel like I know you because of your YouTube presence. And again, looking forward to the outing in the spring. But in our email, I was saying, because you haven't been a ham like some of us since we were kids, how you developed your CW skills. Most of us on here are always trying to get better. And I've noticed for me, being on top of a summit, you've got a wind blowing, you can barely hear anything. You may be running a pile up, but it'd be useful for me to hear you talk about how you developed such a mastery in CW.
I think one of the keys is like what you have in your club is some way of learning. I think just before this presentation, there was a class. So in my case, I used CW Ops as a sort of a learning tool, and I just stuck with it. For a while, I was using tools like computer copying, but that was touch and go. And so I sort of went cold turkey and just went to head copy. And that's what they teach at CW Ops is head copy. And head copy using a fast enough speed. It's hard to head copy at a slow speed, like 5 words per minute. It's too slow for head copy. And you sort of have to learn to, in my case, I think the best way to learn CW is reasonably fast speed, maybe 15 words per minute, or a minimum 10 words per minute. Something that you can sort of store the letters in your brain as it passes by, and develop head copy that way. And so practice and consistency is, I think, the key. I don't know if I answered your question fully, Bob.
Oh, yes, very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Pat N4ZAX asked to go back one slide, and he's asking what was the trail book name on Amazon.
Oh, it's the 100 Unique Summit Challenge on Amazon.
Okay.
And if you just search for my name on Amazon, you'll also get the book that way too. and you can get the Kindle edition or the paperback.
Okay, another question that we have is from Ron K4AAE. Being an owner of HB1-1, what are your thoughts on using it, good or bad?
I owned one at one time, and my friend Scott owned HB1. Or if you're referring to the HB1B, he's had some. One time he was charging his lithium battery inside, and it caught on fire. So I've had some mixed experiences with the HB1B, and so I think the LNR line is much more reliable.
Okay. Although I can answer that, I'll let you answer it, Ariel. At what words per minute is best to start out activating?
Probably. I've worked people who are activating at 10 words per minute. K1 Liz is primarily a single sideband operator, but she's tried valiantly to do activations to CW. I think she was doing 10, but I think the best way is 15. If you can get to 15 or maybe even 12, then you sort of have a good enough speed to be able to dispose of pileups efficiently. Otherwise, it's just hard for everybody to try to get through all the QSOs at a very slow pace, because you will get a lot of callers.
Yeah, I would have answered whatever speed the activator is comfortable of copying, because if you send a 15 but you cannot copy at 15, it will be kind of hard. But you have a point there that 15 or higher or 12 or higher, you can go through the pileup much faster. Another question from Wayne, N3DRV. Can you recommend an antenna for 2 meters?
No, I'm fortunately not very well versed in 2-meter antennas. I think Diamond is probably the ones that people go to as a 2-meter antenna. They have these long whips that you can put on your HT that work much better than the short rubber duck whips.
Or you can use a beam like kind of what those satellite operators are using.
Correct, yeah. A bunch of some of the other guys have done piano wire Yagis or tape measure Yagis for 2 meters. I haven't personally done that.
Okay, Johans, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, KI6M. What are your strategies for managing a pileup?
That's a good question. I guess it's become second nature to me to sort of, because sometimes they'll call all at the same time, and of course when they all call at the same time, you can't pick anyone out, and so you sort of just either wait and someone calls in the clear, or because most of the time you're not working split, so you can't spread them apart like when I was doing DXing. When I was the DX and I'd work split, and they'd be across 15 kilohertz of bandwidth. You typically don't spread them out when you're doing summit. So it's just a matter of waiting for someone to be in the clear.
I want to ask that kind of follow up on what you just said with split. The reason that you cannot do split is because of the radios, those QRP radios, or is it something else?
Yeah, well, the pileups are typically not that big to
Okay.
have to work split. And maybe you'll get at most 15 at one time. It's not like hundreds like when you're doing DXing.
Okay, any other questions?
I had a question. about antenna with the mast and so on. What configurations do you do for your various antennas that you're setting up?
Yeah, the most convenient one is to set it up as an inverted V. You either string one the center support on a tree limb, and it's hard to get an inverted L like where the L part is horizontal, unless you go to great pains to set it up that way. Some people set up verticals by dropping it from a high support and then having radials. I typically just put up an inverted V on most of my activations.
Another question that we have in the chat is from Jim AC3B. How much time do you spend planning, like driving, trailhead, hiking trail, setup, operating time, etc., for a multi-site activation? And he puts an example of 3 summits in one day. And how do you document it?
That's a multi-pronged question there. There was one time I did 5 summits in one day or 4 summits in one day. You have to set it out early. You sort of have to plan so that the summits are sort of close together, and use the planning tools so that you can go from one summit to the next and actually time how much it takes to go to the summit, come back, make your QSOs, come back, go to the next summit. You sort of have to write out an entire schedule and sort of work the plan, make the plan and actually work the plan. That's the only way you can get all those summits in a single day. And sometimes you, like when I did February 14th, 2019, I did either 4 or 5. I had 50 summit points, and I had to carefully plan out where I'm going, how long I'm staying at the summit, coming back down, how much to eat, how much time to allow for eating, driving to the next trailhead. So everything has to be, planning is the key to making that happen. I don't know if I answered, did I miss a part of that?
Yeah. Hi, Ariel. This is Jim. So yeah, but like I found when I'm trying to do multi-summits, I can spend an awful lot of time just trying to figure out, can I get to the summit? Is it on private property or not? And, you know, have other people basically written up notes. It can take a lot of time. And so I was curious if you also experienced that, or you've kind of figured out how to streamline that. All the little details. You know, I did one hike where it was basically then to bushwhack, and it's like, okay, so how do you kind of dial in some planning? I looked at some elevation changes and things like that.
Yeah, I think some of the harder ones you mentioned, Jim, they become standalone because they're difficult. One that was memorable to me was the activation of Double Top and Snaggy Bald. They're next to each other and they're sort of made for each other, because as you descend Snaggy Bald, you sort of make a right turn and go to Double Top. And but it's a long hike. It was 7 miles that day, so it took all day, and it was a lot of bushwhacking too. So, like you said. In thinking that, I relied on the experience of Scott. And that's where having a buddy helps as well.
Okay, thank you. Kel, KI7UXT, is asking, what was the login app on your phone? Like, what is the name? Or
it's called OutDlog. That's the one that works on the iPhone. I think there's another one that works on an Android. It's called VK Portalog.
Okay, thank you. And Tyler, KN4JQB, he've noticed that you were using the carbon fiber SOTA beams mast. He's asking, have you experienced any RF issues due to the carbon fiber?
That's a good question. And Richard over at SOTA Beams actually tested just how much interaction the carbon fiber does. And if you set it up as an inverted V, it has the least interaction with the conductivity of the carbon fiber. But Richard tested it as a vertical, and there was very little interaction. So I've had no trouble at all with interaction with that mast at all. No problem at all.
And Dave K4CHF, he's asking, have you encountered any wildlife, and do you have any action plan for bear encounters or rattlesnakes or dangerous things in general, I guess?
Well, the best strategy with bears is to make noise, because they typically, at least with black bear, the thing to be wary of is to encounter them when they're with their cubs. And if you make noise, I typically have a bell on me when I'm by myself, and it's sort of, that beats having to talk to yourself while hiking. But typically they'll stay away from you if they hear you coming. And it's the surprise that they don't like, especially when they're with their cubs. They typically are not very hostile, unlike some of the Western bears. I've never had a bear encounter. I've shopped for bear spray, but typically I've never had to use it. And they also take up quite a bit in your pack. So that's a long and short of my experience with bears. I've never really encountered one in 141 activations. So I must be doing something right.
And Jim from California, W6JIM, how do you send your call? Just CQ SOTA and the number. And he also writes CQ POTA in case you have done any park activations.
Typically, I just send CQ SOTA with DE, November Yankee 4, DE NY4G. And that's my typical CQ call.
Okay. All right. Well, Ariel, thank you very much for your excellent presentation, and thank you for spending your Saturday morning with the Long Island CW Club. And for all attendees, please unmute and let's give Ariel a nice round of applause.
Thank you, fellas, and thanks for allowing me to share it with you. I'll go on mute now, so I'll let you guys take over.
Great. If you can stop sharing, that will be great. And if you have, if you're available, you can stay online and listen to our next presentation series, if I can speak correctly. So Howard, are you gonna take over? Oops, hold on a second, I need to stop the recording here.